Well, now you see, this involves certain ideas that are quite alien to the West. One, the idea of the world as play. Our Lord God in the West tends to be over-serious, and no great Christian artist has ever painted a laughing Christ or a smiling Christ. Nothing that I've seen from any of the great masters. Always, this figure is tragic and has that sort of look in the eye which says, and quote, one of these days you and I have got to get together for a very serious talk. End quote. So, you see, there is some difficulty about the notion of the world as a dramatic play for us. There's another difficult notion here, and that is cyclic time. Most of us live in linear time. This originated with St. Augustine and his interpretation of the Bible. Now, I don't know how true this really is, but it's certainly a big fashion in modern scholarship to say that it was Judaism that gave us the idea of history. Hindus have no interest in history whatsoever, or at least not until recent times, to the total exasperation of historians. There is no way of finding textual evidence of the age of most Hindu scriptures because they aren't interested in history as such. They are only interested in human events as archetypal occurrences, as repetitions of great mythological themes, over and over again. So, if a document started out saying a certain adventure happened to King so-and-so, whom everybody knew at the time, in the next generation they had changed the name of that king to the current king because the story was typical anyway. They just wanted to say, and quote, a king that everybody knew, and quote, they altered things in that way, and so they know no kind of chronology. And if you ask even quite intelligent Asians about this, they have difficulty understanding what kind of question you're asking. What is this history thing? On the other hand, according to our scholars, the Jews were historically minded, because they remembered the story of their descent from Adam and Abraham, the great event of the liberation from Egypt, and then the triumphant reign of King David, followed by a decline as other political forces grew stronger. This gave them a sense of a future, a hope that one day, the day of the Lord would come, the Messiah would put an end to history, and there would be a restoration of paradise. But this view is linear. They didn't think of the world as having been created many, many times before and ending many times before. There's one clear ascent from start to finish, from Alpha to Omega. When St. Augustine was thinking about this, he thought, and quote, if time is cyclic, Jesus would have to be crucified for the salvation of the world once in every cycle, end quote. But for some reason, he was firmly convinced that there was only one historical crucifixion in time, what they call the end quote. One full, perfect, sufficient sacrifice, oblation, and satisfaction for the sins of the whole world. End quote. Once is enough. Now, of course, he got his hierarchies confused. It's true, there is one sacrifice, but that's on the plane of eternity. On the plane of time, eternal things can be repeated again and again. As a result of that, we have inherited not a Greek time concept. The Greeks also had cyclic time like the Hindus, but linear time. And therefore, we're always thinking of a progression that will take us steadily, faster and faster, toward a more perfect world. It will get better and better all the way if we keep our heads. Now, this shows, I think, a rather naive view of human nature. Human beings tend to smash what they create and say, and quote, let's do it again, end quote. There is that childlike impulse. Rub it out, what fun! So, it isn't realistic to suppose that humans will simply get better and better because they'll soon get tired of it. They'll say, and quote, let's be as awful as possible, end quote. There was even an element of this in Nazism, end quote. How awful can you get? How brutal? How destructive? End quote. And it's not just Germans, who have that urge. We are converting the living world around us into waste, pretending it doesn't happen that way. We are marvelous vortices in this stream of food, which whirls around as us and then disappears into excrements, which fertilize the soil, and we keep at it. So, you see, there's that quality in us represented by Shiva Kali, and it's always there. The Hindu views the world with hard-boiled realism, seeing terror and magnificence, love and fury as two faces of the same thing. And you could ask, and quote, is peace possible? End quote. After looking at this picture for a long time, after conceiving endless cycles that go on and on, world without end, per omnia secula seculorum, and sometimes the Hindu feels, and quote, oh Brahma, don't you ever get tired of it? End quote. No, because Brahma doesn't have to remember anything, and you only get tired of things you remember. That's why, from Brahma and hashtag 039's standpoint, there's no time, only an eternal now. So, The secret to waking up from this endless drama is realizing that the only time that exists is the present. When you become awake to that, boredom ends, and you're delivered from the cycles. Not in the sense that they disappear, you still go through them, but you realize they aren't going anywhere. Now, suppose you liken the rhythm of these cycles to music. Surely you don't hurry it up. You don't say, and quote, let's get to the end faster. And quote, you learn how to listen to music by slowing down time, sitting back, and letting it be. And in the same way, you can see every little detail of life in a new way. You say, and quote, oh my, look at that, and quote. And one's eyes open in astonishment by being living totally here and now. So the guru challenges you. You see, he challenges you. If you raise the quest, he doesn't go out and preach in the streets saying, and quote, come on, everybody ought to be converted, end quote. Instead, he stops under a tree and waits. People start gathering, offering propositions, and he answers back, challenging you in any way he finds appropriate to your situation. Now, if you've got a thin shell and your mask is easily shed, he simply uses what we might call an, end quote, easy method, end quote. Listen, Shiva, come off it. Don't pretend you're this guy here. I know who you are. And the person kind of twinkles, saying, well, I guess you're right. But for people with very thick shells, he has to invent ways of cracking them. Here's how it goes. To understand yoga, you need to get a good translation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I don't know the best translation, there are so many, but a friend of mine recommends the one in the Harvard Oriental series by Woods. It begins with, now yoga is explained. The commentators say now has a special meaning because it follows something else you're supposed to know. You're supposed to be, in other words, a civilized human being before starting yoga. We don't teach yoga to a baboon, after all. You and hashtag 039 expected to have already been disciplined in what I told you earlier, karma and dharma, the totality of political sense, justice. Once you have that, then you can start yoga. The next verse says, and quote, yoga is the cessation of revolutions of the mind, end quote. This can be interpreted on many levels. Chit means consciousness, like a pool of water, a reflecting pool. If there are waves on it, the reflections break up, so stop the waves on the mind, and it will reflect reality clearly. Perfectly calm mind is one meaning. Another interpretation suggests stopping all thoughts, feelings, and sensations. How do you do that? Well, he explains that you do it through certain steps. First, pranayama, which means control of the breath. Then pratyahara, preliminary concentration. Dharana, a more intense form of concentration. Dhyana, or profound union between subject and object. And finally samadhi, which is way out there. Now, what's happening? You control your mind, starting with breathing. Breathing is a strange thing because it's both voluntary and involuntary. You can say, I breathe. Yet it also breathes you. Yoga has many breathing techniques which are amusing to practice because they get you quite high. You're sitting in lotus position, bending down, breathing in through the left nostril, out through the right, then the reverse. Imagine the current going down your spine, stirring the base of your spine, and then lifting up, the serpent power, the kundalini, which lies dormant at the center of sexual energy, now ascending to the brain. If you're bright, you may begin to realize something at that point. If not, you continue on to the next exercise, concentration. This is an absolutely fascinating undertaking. Try this. Look at a small light reflection on a polished surface, something like a candle or a light bulb. Let your eyes unfocus so it becomes a fuzzy circle. Then examine its pattern. You might find it hypnotic. Eventually, you'll look deeper, almost as if falling down a funnel of light. Then suddenly, the guru wakes you up, asking, why are you doing that? You say, because I want realization. He asks, why? You answer, because if we identify with the ego, we suffer and get into a mess. He says, so you're afraid of that? You say, yes. He replies, then all your yoga practice is based on fear. Do you think you'll reach realization through fear? You think, I must keep practicing my yoga, but not out of fear. The guru, a very perceptive man, watches you carefully. He knows when you and hashtag 039 re-motivated by fear. He steers you toward developing a pure motive, requiring deep control of your emotions. So you go along repressing impure thoughts. Then one day he asks, "Why are you trying to have a pure mind?" You realize you've had an impure motive for wanting a pure mind, fear. The very efforts towards liberation only deepen the trap. Every step towards liberation becomes a new tie-up, trapping you more. The guru is always dangling new baits, like there are endless levels to reach. Just as you're about to give up, he says you're making progress on level 64 out of who knows how many. Eventually, you realize that your ego, or what you call your mind, is just spinning in circles. You reach a point of seeing that no amount of concentration, no trick, and no effort will truly help you. And this realization is a breakthrough. Suddenly, you understand that freedom doesn't come through struggle, it comes through surrender, through simply being so. It is announced that the subject of the seminars is play and survival. Are they in necessary contradiction? We're going to examine the subject in the context of Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Jewish, Hindu, Taoist, and scientific naturalism. Living, it seems to me, is a spontaneous process. The Chinese term for nature is one that means that which is so of itself. That which happens is very curious because of our grammar that we speak in almost all standard average European languages, we are unable to imagine a process that happens by itself. Every verb must have a noun. It has its subject, a director. We think nothing is in order unless someone or something orders it, unless there's somebody in charge. And so, to us, the idea of a process of nature which happens of itself by itself is frightening because there seems to be no authority. Therefore, in the United States, we are in a serious social and political conflict. We think that we ought to be living in a republic, but the great majority of citizens believe that the universe is a monarchy. You cannot be a loyal citizen of the United States unless you believe that a republic is the best form of government. So, we're always seeking a monarch, for someone else upon whom to push the responsibility. We won't take it ourselves. We are always complaining that where we are is the result of our past. My mother and father were neurotic, and therefore they made me neurotic, and their fathers and mothers were neurotic and made them neurotic. And so it goes back to Adam and Eve. And you remember what happened in the Garden of Eden. God set a trap by saying, "There is that specific tree, and you mustn't eat the fruit of it." If he had really not wanted them to eat the fruit, he wouldn't have said anything about it. By drawing attention to it in this way, it was obvious they were going to eat it. So, when he saw Adam looking guilty, he said, "Adam, hast thou eaten of the fruit of the tree whereof I told thee thou shouldst not eat?" And he said, "The woman you gave me, she tempted me, and I did it." God looked very severely and said, "Eve, have you eaten of the fruit of the tree whereof I told you thou shalt not eat?" She said, "The serpent beguiled me." And God looked at the serpent. This isn't written in the Bible, but they went to each other because they had planned long in advance. The universe was not going to be a merely obedient arrangement. Well, I God say you shall do thus and so, and you will automatically do it. There would be no fun in that because of Venus prizes. So, it is the Hebrew theology that God put into the heart of Adam at the creation a thing called the Yetzer Hara, which means the wayward spirit. Just the kind of little twist, just like you. Well, when you make a stew, you put some salt in it. You don't want the whole stew to be salt, but just a touch. So, God, in creating Adam, put just a touch of wickedness so that something surprising and different would happen, which God would not be able to master. Now, this is very important. You see, what we're going to talk about mainly is our sense of identity, our sense of alienation, and the complications we put ourselves into by regarding survival as a duty. These all connect together. You may not see the connection immediately, but if you imagine yourself in the position of being God in the literal popular sense of God, the Father Almighty, it means you're a male chauvinist pig and you're in charge of everything. You know all pasts, you know all futures. You're completely in control of the cosmos. You have absolute power, and you are bored to death. So you say to yourself, "Man, get lost. I want a surprise." And here you are. Oh, you must admit it. The whole mark of insanity is to know that you're God. That's an absolute taboo, not only in the Christian religion, because Jesus got crucified for knowing that. And the Christians said, okay, Jesus was God, but let it stop right there. Nobody else.